Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. If you're enjoying the show, please leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. My dad will be so grateful. See you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.
Welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast, a show about crafting a life you love and making work optional, using the tools of mindfulness, envisioning, and financial independence. I'm your host, Adam Cuello, and I'm so glad you're here. Each episode of the Mindful Fire podcast explores these three tools through teachings, guided meditations, and inspiring interviews with people actually living them to craft a life they love. At its core, Mindful Fire is about creating more awareness and choice in your life. Mindfulness helps you develop self-awareness to know yourself better and what's most important to you by practicing a kind, curious awareness. Envisioning is all about choosing to think big about your life and putting the power of your predicting brain to work to create the life you dream of. And financial independence brings awareness and choice to your financial life, empowering you to make your vision a reality by getting your money sorted out and ultimately making work optional. And here's the best part. You don't have to wait until you reach financial independence to live out your vision. Mindful Fire is about using these tools to craft that life now on the path to financial independence and beyond. If you're ready to start your Mindful Fire journey, go to mindfulfire.org/start and download my free envisioning guide. In just 10 minutes, this guide will help you craft a clear and inspiring vision for your life. Again, you can download it for free at mindfulfire.org/start. Let's jump into today's episode. Nadia, welcome to the Mindful Fire podcast. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Adam and TGIF.
Yeah, it's Friday. We made it. I'd love for you to start by sharing a little bit about your journey and what you're up to in the world.
Yeah, well, you and I met here in New York, even if virtually. I moved to Manhattan from Italy in July 2020, July 1st. And I'm very precise with the date because that marks the start of my second life. That's how I say it. We moved here during the pandemic, so we were really in the middle of it. When we arrived in the city, there wasn't one car in the street, so that was fascinating, I have to say, with my husband and with my two girls, Lavinia and Olympia. And I work at Google, so we are colleagues there. And my mission in the world, well, I have two missions really. One is that I'm a corporate executive. So I'm a woman in ad tech, and I'm all about helping agencies and helping clients in transforming their processes and their businesses through technology. That's one. But then the second thing that I'm really passionate about is that I define myself as a modern witch, if I can use the word, which is all about kindling, energizing others, getting people to reconnect with their sparkles, and really getting a hold of what's important for you and finding the resources and the tools and the connections, whatever you might need in that moment to go get it. And I dream about writing books, publishing podcasts, or launching events, really do whatever it takes to create communities around this concept. Because as I was saying earlier, we're just in this life for, if we are lucky, 100 years, 110, I don't know how much that will be. And so I want to make a lasting impact for my children, my grandchildren, and the people who know me, that will remind them how important it is to be happy.
Very interesting. I have not heard the term modern witch before, but that's a good one. That's a good one. It brings me back to Broad City. Have you watched Broad City?
No, what is it?
Oh man, it's a comedy show that takes place in New York City, and it's these two young women just trying to like live in New York and like make it work. And there's an episode where she's like talking about being a witch, and it's like,
oh, I have to watch
witchy,
it.
Like,
is it on Netflix? Where do I find it?
It's on Hulu, I think. It's hilarious.
I'm going to watch it eventually. I strongly believe that we are humans, part of planet Earth, and especially women. You said you're on paternity leave, so I assume you had a baby recently, but especially women, we do create life. And if there's nothing that is which, that's what it is, creating and making miracles. And the biggest miracles is giving life, and we create this life in our bodies. And so for all the women, even if you have children or not have children, we do have the potential to have them. And for me, reconnecting with my deeper self of being a woman and having those powers is being one of the most important revelation in my life lately.
That's a very interesting perspective. Yeah. Going through the process of my wife grow a human being out of her body is pretty wild. Like, wild is the term that I think about, because we are animals. We are, she created life in her body. And so it's an interesting perspective. And to hear you think about how you bring that energy into your work and your life to uplift other people and to give them life and help them live the life that they're meant to live. How did this come to be so important to you? It's a big area of your life. You mentioned that you moved from Italy in 2020, starting your second life. What happened over the intervening 10 years? Like, you started Google in 2009. How did this become such an important part of your life and your career?
That's a very insightful question, which is making me think right in this moment. I tend to be an extremely aware human being. I'm a Virgo, and so Virgo tend to be very self-critic with themselves. We keep connecting into the astrology and stars and the moons and all that. I've always knew in my life that when people meet me, I have a lasting impact on them. It's really rare and uncommon that you would meet me and you forget about me. And I say this in an humble way, of course, with a little bit of pride, but it does happen. You would spend some time with me, and generally the dynamic would be, oh my God, I want to see you again. Oh my God, your energy really changed me, even your voice, your presence. So throughout the years before coming to New York, this was happening very much in the work environment. It would either be a client, or it would be a colleague, or sometimes it would be a friend, but it was happening and I wasn't paying a lot of attention to it. It was just part of who I was. And I was like, okay, I'm just a fun energy bunny, I would call myself. And I wasn't really putting any thoughts into it. And I wasn't considering it a special power. I was just living by it. And I was always like that, even when I was a child, when I was a teenager, even if at school I was the unpopular one because I had a very weird upbringing, but I knew that there was something. And then what happened is that in 2019, there was a life event that for me was one of those tough frog to swallow. I know we were talking about failure and unexpected events and all this. Something happened in the work environment that really made me sad, unhappy, and it was really, really tough to process. And eventually it was kind of a wake-up call, because through that experience, I started getting very close to coaching, and I started my coaching education. I became an executive life coach, and I made peace with my dream of moving to a big city with my family. And then from there, everything really started unfolding. I started doing some inner search work. I started learning about mindfulness. I started learning about spirituality, but more on a personal, like I'm not part of any religious establishment anymore, even if I grew up with a very strict religious education. But let's say that New York really, with its inclusive approach and with its opening, opened for me the gates to make peace with my powers, really embrace the ability that I have, not only to step into a coach position, and so through more traditional, of course, coaching education, help others, but really using this power that I have to connect energetically with others, to sparkle something in them so that they want to do it. Which I know is a bit of an explanation that is very evanescent, if I might say. But the way it translates is that after you spend an hour with me, you'll be like, oh, dang, I really want to go and do that thing. And this is happening a lot on LinkedIn as well. I've been experimenting with my communication and advocating a lot of my time. You cannot imagine how many people, when they see me in person, they keep referring back to my LinkedIn post. So even if I don't have crazy followers, whenever someone sees me, they're like, oh, what you said on LinkedIn 3 days ago, help me do X. Even you did it. You said it now. Like you commented me on, and then you gave me energy. So I don't know what's in there, Adam, but I keep exploring these powers and I keep experimenting and see what's in there.
Very interesting. So it sounds like you've had these powers, this way of being that you can connect with people easily. You can inspire them to make them believe in themselves and want to move and do the thing that they're meant to do.
Yes, you summarized it beautifully.
Thank you. Just trying to make sure I'm on the same page. And it seems like this move to New York was a new opportunity to step into that power and to really recognize like that pattern is actually your superpower. And you can step into that and make that a focus and a priority for you.
That's exactly what it is. You used the beautiful word, the step into my powers. That's how I call it. And I've been working with a personal coach. I have 2 personal coaches that I work with on a regular basis. And with one specifically, we've been doing a lot of work in defining those powers and talking about those powers. Because what happens is that I feel it, right? And I see people when they feel it. And because we are in a world that is based on communication, and of course, I want to launch my website and I want to invest more in this, I was like, how do I talk about it? Like, what does it mean? What do people get from me? What is the value exchange? Especially in the corporate environment, we speak often about this value exchange. Assuming you pay me for one of the services, what are you getting in return? And the reason why New York for me was a bit of a revelation, assuming that maybe I was living here before, growing very passionate about the woods upstate and everything that is planet Earth, and I've been discovering and searching. So maybe I was living here, in a previous life. For me, the fact that a city like New York is so open, it's a city that is non-judgmental. It's a city where you can be whatever you want to be. It's a place where if tomorrow morning you wake up and you're going to go in the street dressed in a different way or dyeing your hair white or do whatever you want to be, no one says anything. You can truly be yourself without fear that someone is going to judge you. Now, I don't want to say that in Italy you get judged, but probably the fact that it's a culture a little bit more conservative and smaller cities, I always felt that I couldn't be fully myself. Whereas in New York, it's almost like I was dropping every tie that I had of being conformed human being, and I could embrace my true self, which is being also a little bit different and having my beliefs and exploring and speaking in energies. And of course, it doesn't mean that I'm not a corporate executive, that I can talk about data and business plans and blending the numbers and all that. That's my rational brain. But I do believe that we're guided by our intuition. And I do believe that there are forces. I do believe that we are connected. There are energies. And when we try to live by this, our life gets better and is happier.
Yeah, very interesting. That's an interesting take on New York. I've heard that before. Yeah. I don't know if that's what I feel when I go to New York. I feel overwhelmed when I go to New York. I feel like you can do whatever you want because like everyone's doing their own thing. They're doing their thing. You're doing your thing.
I don't know your roots, but I grew up in a town, or we could call a village, that was 12,000 people. And the first time I left the island, I was 18. So I grew up very much, I don't want to say like Mohana, because my dad was not a fisherman and all that, and the island was with inhabitants. But I've always had this desire to go see, go find, this propelling energy that really meant something bigger for me. And of course, back then I didn't want it, but I was literally counting the days until I was turning 18 to take a plane and go to the mainland in Italy and go study and then branch out. And New York was not even my wildest dreams. So when we speak about envisioning and manifesting and all that, I was 6 years old and my teacher asked me, this is my TEDx. She asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a manager in a large corporation.
You said that when you were 6?
I said that when I was 6. I didn't say corporation, but I said it in Italian. Like, I want to be a manager in a big company. Back then, my mom was the door-to-door sellers. I'm sure you remember Avon when they would do those meetings and sell those products. So my mom was the regional manager of one of these companies in Sardinia. So she would bring me in all of those meetings. And so I learned very young in my age, the art of selling. And I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. So I learned very early the art of objection handling and resilience and going door to door and finding clients and measuring metrics. I was 7 years old the first time I spoke in front of an audience of 200 people.
Wow.
So I had all of this in my body. And yet the environment where I was too small. And so I had to have an outlet. And I believe that New York eventually is providing me that outlet to really think big. And of course, thanks to the Google resources, I can allocate time and I can allocate financial resources and saying, what is the space for me to shine and get it all out?
Very interesting. That makes sense. Wow. That's what a story. I'm glad I asked. So let's talk more about envisioning, right? I know I call it envisioning. You might call it manifesting. It's all essentially the same thing, putting out into the world what you want to create. That's how I think about it, putting it out into the world, what you want to create, and then making it happen. So I'd love to hear, how do you think about envisioning and what role has it played in your life so far?
Yes, Adam, this is a topic that is so dear to my heart, among the other ones. You are catching me in a day where just yesterday I got a news that I didn't get what I was envisioning and what I really wanted. So my faith in the practice and my belief today are a little shaky, but I tend to believe that everything happens for a reason. If I look back at my life, everything that I eventually got is the result of envisioning and manifesting. And it's puzzling to me that I was doing it even without knowing that I was doing it. And only now, in the middle of my life, when I look back, I can see the dots connecting. I can see why something happened and that I was bringing that to myself with my thoughts without realizing. So I often say to my friends, careful what to wish for, because eventually you'll get it. Now, sometimes we get it in a different way. The path is not often linear. There are bumps in the road, there are turns, and there are sideways. There are many ways. But fundamentally, I believe that a big part of the exercise is taking the time to sink in what is the most important thing, and to align our priorities, align where we're allocating our time, and align what we're building to what we want. Now, there are ways that are more prescriptive. There are ways that are more scientific. There are ways that are more spiritual. As I told you about the witchcraft, and I started reading a lot of books about it, and I started exploring a bit of this word. And eventually that's also all about manifesting and envisioning. Because when they do the spells and when they do those practices, there's going to be a full moon on Sunday, for example. It's all about envisioning and manifesting. Like when we write down a wish, how many times we say to our children, I'm sure you did as well, what are you wishing for Christmas or for the holidays? What are you wishing to go? It's all about manifesting and envisioning what we want. Now, there are several degrees I could wish to have a pizza tonight or a sushi, and I can say about it. And I wish to be a director in the next 9 months. And so I do the work to do it. That for me, the common denominator among all of the things that people are envisioning and manifesting is, what are you building around this wish? And I often say to my team that one piece of it is identifying what you want. And then the second piece is, what are the work that you're going to build around what you want? What are the people that you're going to talk to? How are you going to protect your energy? Like what you said earlier, when you said you're going to be on this big podcast. I love what you said. That was, I need to get ready for it. And I'm sure you were manifesting and being in this podcast for so much time. And now is, how are you going to keep yourself accountable in getting ready so that this experience is going to be exactly what you want it to be? And the outcome is going to be what you envision it to be. For me, this is a part of life that, since I moved to New York again, started to be, let's say, more tied to my awareness of it. I designed my life plan since 2015. I literally have a deck where I have one chart for every year, and it's divided between professional and personal, and it's divided in 12 months, 5 years, and 10 years. And every year I go back and I strike down what I've accomplished. And I said, okay, this is something that still need to work on. Do I still want it? And I reassess. And I showed it to my husband because in 2015, I had already written that I wanted 2 girls. Now, I don't want to say that was magic, but when I look back, I'm like, it happened.
It's pretty interesting. Yeah. I've had a similar experience, right? Long before I knew about the term envisioning or manifesting, any of this, I was doing it, right? I think back to this time where I was like praying. I wanted to pass my AP exam. I thought, I'm going to pray. I'm begging God, let me pass this test. And it's like, but I was doing it. I was constantly doing that, right? So I was planting those seeds in my mind. And then I was studying, like I was taking the action. So I really like what you're saying. I guess what I'm saying is that I've always been doing this as well. And looking back, it's easy to see how the dots connected. You know, I had this experience this year where it was the culmination of like 20 years of envisioning. I went to this camp as a kid, this sports camp. It's like an extreme sports camp called Woodward. And I went there as a kid. It was like, I was like a rollerblade as a child. And I am again, as an adult. I had this dream of like, I wanted to go back to this place. I would always think like, oh, wow, I love that place. I want to create a place like this. I want to go back there. And then like a year and a half or 2 years ago, I had this idea when I moved to New Jersey. I was like, I'm only 4 hours away. Like maybe I can go there and like teach mindfulness. Like I was like, how can I go there for free, basically? And I was like, maybe I go there and teach mindfulness. And I took action. One thing led to another. And in March of this year, I opened their corporate retreat with envisioning and a mindfulness and envisioning workshop. Yeah. And I got to go there and I got to skate and I got to teach. And I also had envisioned at the start of the year that I wanted to teach my first paid external envisioning workshop. And so it's just like amazing how this happens. And so looking back, it's like, wow, that was like 20 years in the making. So it's pretty cool to see that. Today you're in this place where you went for this job, you didn't get the job, and you had envisioned this, right? You envisioned it. And sometimes the path isn't linear or a straight line to get what we want. And so I'm curious, if you envision something and it doesn't happen, does envisioning work? Like, what do you do then?
You are asking me all of the tough questions. Definitely, you're a brave interviewer, a brave host, I would say. And let me first say congratulations on getting your dream. It really fills my heart to hear those stories because, listen, it's all that it matters, like these moments, the joy, and can't imagine the value that you created for these people there. And congratulations on your resilience, because 20 years in the making, it means that you kept thinking about it and you kept wanting it and driving for it. So Really beautiful story. I love it.
Thank you.
And when it comes to what happens when we don't get what we want, look, today I'm very disappointed because the wound is still fresh. And while my brain, of course, is gripping to all of the rational explanations that I can possibly think of, because again, I'm a corporate executive, and so I know how these things go. And I know that it's not only about my performance, it's not only about me, that's only a piece of the game and of the puzzle. There are so many other components. So my brain started immediately to rationalize. Of course, I'm a earth sign, so I tend to be with my feet on the ground and all that. But my soul and my heart is very upset. And I feel betrayed by the universe. Because I say, universe, I was manifesting, I was envisioning, and did all of my homeworks. I did all my daily practices, all my gratefulness, and I did all of my studying. I applied myself very much. I did all of the things that I preach, and all of the things that I teach, and all of the things that I believe. And to your question, does it work? Probably today and tomorrow and maybe still Monday, I'm going to be still the skeptic. And I'm going to say, oh, maybe that doesn't work. What am I envisioning? Come on, this is all, woo-woo. Why am I doing that? But then deep inside my heart, I tend to challenge myself. And this is also a bit therapeutic talking to you about it, because I'm like, what if this was a preparation for something bigger that I need to go for? And one of the things that I do that I didn't mention is that I also read the tarot cards. Recently, this year I embraced this practice as a self-care practice. And I sit there and I shuffle my cards and I journal and I reflect, and I know who I am. And I don't want for this failure, if we want to mark it as failure, I don't want for this obstacle to define me. I know and I believe in my worth. And I want to believe that by continuing doing the work, by continuing putting the manifestation out, by continuing to put those energy, eventually what I want to land will land. Now it's going to take longer, and competition is fierce, and I want closure. I want to know the feedback. What is it that I should have demonstrated more? Could I have exemplified my examples differently? Of course, I still want to have that, but I still manifest that I get it. My timeline was July next year. So my initial manifestation was by mid 2023. So I still have time.
Very cool. Listening to you talk about this, it's very interesting. What you're saying earlier, about it doesn't necessarily come in the way that we want it, in the timeline that we want it. It doesn't always work that way. And so hearing you talk about, you took all the actions, right? What I was thinking about earlier is like, we have to know what we want. That's step one. Step two is to align our energy and our actions and our thoughts with what we want. And you've done that. But at the same time, it doesn't always come in the way and in the timeline that we want. So listening to you, I fully believe that this was your practice round. And the next time you're going to show up, and maybe the opportunity that comes up, you mentioned YouTube, right? Maybe YouTube is going to come up with a director role soon, and that'll be what you end up with. But I think it's only inevitable that's going to happen. It's just the when and the how and the what.
And I also think that when we get something from the universe, is because maybe there's something we need to still work on ourselves that we were not ready. And I'm not whipping myself down. I still believe I'm ready to be a director. And so I'm just looking for the role. But there is something around purpose. So there's a book that I really recommend everyone to read that I've been gifting to all of my friends, that is called Into the Magic Shop. I did a LinkedIn post about this. The author is James Doty, is a neuroscientist. And I got this book from another friend. So it's a nice chain of passing this along. And so it's a neuroscience, right? So if you're skeptical about this is a doctor, a PhD, very known, very important personality that if you want to hire for your company, charges several thousands of dollars to speak. One might say, I'm skeptical about the woo-woo. So if you're skeptical, you want to listen to him. And James wrote this wonderful book about his life and how he learned the powers of manifestation and envisioning and mindfulness and meditation and all that. And he speaks about purpose. He speaks about how when you want something, eventually you need to align to your purpose. Why you want what you want? What are you going to do it once you have it? And what is the deeper motivation? Now, I'm not saying that my motivation to get this role was the wrong one, but this is giving me an opportunity to reflect and align to who I am really deeper. And I have so many projects that I'm pursuing, right? I want to open my podcast channel. I'm writing a book. I want to publish a book. There's so many things in this world that maybe when in 10 years from now, I'm going to look back at this moment, there's going to be something that I'm going to see that will make me say, uh-huh. Now, today I'm still upset and I'm still frustrated and I'm still dealing with my emotions. So the work today on Friday is to really get over it. So all of my self-care, I'm going to go to Central Park and I'm going to get a nice walk. I'm going to probably cry. I'm not ready to talk to friends yet. So I'm creating space. And probably it's going to be like this for the next 2-3 days. But I do want to believe that there's something for me that I will continue to get.
Well, first, thank you for sharing this with me. You're protecting your space to be by yourself. You canceled your meetings. You're not talking about it with friends, but you are talking about it on a podcast. So that's not a small thing. So I appreciate you and you showing up and sharing this with me today.
Well, there is a reason. Let me say this, not to interrupt you, but I mulled over if I wanted to tell you or not. And I decided that I wanted to tell you and I wanted to talk about it with you because if only one person, when they're going to listen to your podcast, are going to say, wow, she is human and I'm learning from her experience and she's giving me fuel to keep going because failure is real and we can get up and keep going, that's going to be my healing balm. And that is going to serve me as well as we go through this. Because helping others and supporting others in succeeding is my mission. So I hope people will listen and will learn about this failure. And I hope that maybe in 6 months from now, we're going to do another podcast where I speak about what my role was in the end.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I fully expect and I look forward to celebrating your director role at YouTube or elsewhere. And I do like that you called that out, right? That you said that this is healing for you. Knowing that your story might help somebody is healing for you. Thank you again for that. All right. So Nadia, let's switch gears into what I call the Mindful Fire Final Four. The first question is about envisioning. So what is something that you have envisioned in your life that seemed impossible, but that by having it clear in your mind, you made it happen?
Living in New York. I got to tell you, it took me 2 years to eventually make it happen. It seemed impossible financially with a family and all of it. And I got to tell you, when I took that plane to JFK, it was like, whoa.
It's happening. Yeah. That's amazing. That's amazing. And we talked a lot about that experience. The second question is, what piece of advice would you give to someone early on their path to financial independence?
I would definitely suggest to read this book from Ken Honda that is called Happy Money, because I believe that if we find a way to change our relationship with money and the way we think about it, in money being a mean to an end and a resource to get bigger happiness or bigger support, that eventually makes it or break it. So for me, and learning about this new mindset as being completely game changing.
Very interesting. I've heard of that book. I think I saw it on LinkedIn or something. Definitely will plan to listen to that, and I'll link that up in the show notes as well. There's another book you might want to listen to. I don't know if you heard my podcast with Sarah McCrum. You might want to check that out. It's very much up your alley. It's a book that it's called Love Money, Money Loves You. And it's as if she claims that the book it kind of came through her. It's the energy of money explaining itself to human beings, basically. So it's a very interesting book. It's definitely a little out there, but based on our conversation, I think you would really enjoy it. And
100%. Those are the things I like. Yes, I bookmarked
it's very interesting. The one and only time I went to New York City this year, I was listening to it as I was like taking the ferry. And I remember walking down the street and being like, what the hell is she talking about? It was very interesting.
Now I want to read it immediately.
Yeah. Check out the podcast. It's one of the most interesting podcasts I've had. Like, it's just like, it forced me to reckon with my own up and down relationship with money. You mentioned that. We can certainly talk about that another time. I think that would be very interesting.
Oh, I have so many stories about that. You want to hear those?
Yeah. All right. Question number 3 is, what piece of advice would you give to someone getting started with meditation and or mindfulness?
So I'm going to share what has been useful to me, which is be open to experimentation. Because when I started initially, I was getting frustrated because I knew only one way. And the moment I started exploring other ways, it became easier. What I mean by that, there's a sound meditation. There's crystal meditation. There are so many options. Like, what's important in the end is that you stand still and you focus your thinking and on your breath or on the music or whatever. And for me, taking those steps in experimenting with a variety of options made me aware and eventually gave me the value of recognizing that what matters is the work, but how you do it, you can be flexible. So it's not one size fits all. And what matters is the time and the dedication that you put into it.
That is amazing advice. There's not just one right way to do it, right? It's all about carving out the time, sitting down, getting quiet with yourself, and showing up and looking inward is really what it's all about. And there's many ways to do that. The final question, Nadia, is how can people connect with you and learn more about what you're up to?
I welcome people connecting with me. This is part of my manifestation as well, putting it out there and welcoming the opportunities. People can follow me on LinkedIn, where I share posts that are inspirational and uplifting. People can find me on Instagram, where I share about my life, my girls, and about living in New York. And I always welcome new energies. And so if people want to email me as well at my address, that is nadia.carta@gmail.com. I'd be very happy to connect through those tools. You can check me out on my website. That is nadiacarta.com.
Very good. All right. I will include links to all of those in the show notes, and definitely connect with Nadia on LinkedIn. It's an inspiration to read her posts every day. And I'm sure that you can reach out to Nadia and she'll answer your questions. So reach out in the comments or DM her, and you can ask her thoughts on anything. Definitely reach out.
Thank you, Adam. I loved our conversation. You're a special human being.
Right back at you. Thank you for being here, and have a good weekend processing the event. And I know big things are coming for you. You'll get back to that feeling soon enough. And I'm sure you already know it in your heart. Have a wonderful weekend, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for joining me on today's episode of the Mindful Fire podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, I invite you to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this. This just lets the platforms know you're getting value from the episodes and you want to be here when I release additional content. If you're ready to start your Mindful Fire journey, go to mindfulfire.org/start and download my free Envisioning guide. In just 10 minutes, this guide will help you craft a clear and inspiring vision for your life. Again, you can download it for free at mindfulfire.org/start. Thanks again, and I'll catch you next time on the Mindful Fire podcast.